Torah speaks about going out to war. Against an enemy. We've heard the concepts of war. We can appreciate the pressure it places on the human nervous system. But we don't really understand what the experience is like. But we're involved in a war nevertheless. And the war that we're involved in is much deeper, much more meaningful than any physical war. The war that we're fighting has been fought for thousands of years. In fact, all the physical wars were a result of humanity losing in this war. When humanity loses in the spiritual war, then there is a physical war. Because the war that we're fighting is against human anger. And a war against anger cannot be fought with violence. A war against anger, if fought with violence, is like adding fuel to the fire. And so it requires tremendous wisdom to know how to even go to war with human anger. How do you fight against human anger? What are the reasons for human anger? What's the cause? And so whenever we lost in the war against human anger, that's when the physical wars broke out. Because the anger would just take over the masses until there was physical bloodshed. And so the war that we're fighting is still the same war. The war that we're fighting is still what's causing all human suffering. Because anger has many different faces. Anger is a result of human nature being violated, being ignored, being disrespected, being neglected. And so at the core of all of our suffering is a response to something that violated our nature, and that response is anger in its many different forms. And in fact, it is this anger that caused humanity to behave in ways that are not within their nature, are not within their best interest, are not comfortable for the one behaving and for the one being affected, for the environment. And it's caused humanity to become afraid of itself and of what it's capable of. It's caused humanity to become afraid of human nature. Because human nature, when angry, can be extremely ugly. And the damage that causes, the damage of that ugliness, the trauma that's left in those who witnessed that manifestation of the human nature, is what keeps the suffering alive. Because this impression of the spiritual reality that was being demonstrated affects the perception of reality in the future. And so, as that person is trying to interact with life, the image, the impression that was left by the event witnessed is part of the lens of how life is being interpreted, how life is being understood. And so every form of manifestation that contains within it human anger is taking humanity further away from being able to release their nervous system from the tension that it's currently carrying. And so this war is continuous. It's not obvious to most, because anger is an acceptable response to certain situations. In fact, some situations require a response of anger. But those situations shouldn't have been happening. And so anger shouldn't have been there. It's just that when certain things happen, then anger is an accurate response. But the event that causes the anger, or the impressions of anger that can cause anger even on insignificant things, on things that don't require or don't justify anger, or the irritability of tired nerves of people who have suffered and gone through different things, and they can no longer control their response to reality. So all these forms of anger are all at their source there to protect humanity. So even the anger, even the most difficult part of our nature, the part that causes us to have all these hidden energies that are working against us, the part that causes each one of us to carry a spiritual shadow around, a shadow meaning a part of us that has input that is not within our best interest. So even this part is simply a protective mechanism of the spirit. It's there because it needs to be there. It's there to protect us so things don't get even worse. So that our spirit responds to certain violations, and we realize that a boundary has been crossed. And so our anger depends on our interpretation of life. On certain levels, when we reach certain spiritual levels, there's no longer any interpretations that would cause anger. There are no longer any events that can cause anger, except events that relate to the collective. Events that relate to the collective, events that frustrate the destiny prescribed by the collective for humanity, that results in anger within all spirits. That's the nature of the spirit. And this was the fear. Moshe Rabbeinu even was afraid of the anger that comes when the collective will is frustrated. Because that force is beyond us. We receive life through that force. When that force is not being manifested appropriately in this world, then all of us receive less access to reality. And so in this war that's very real, in this war that's being fought constantly by all of us, in this war that tested all the great people of the past, in this war, our strongest weapon is our ability to create words, our ability to create concepts, to create interpretations, to create realities that are going to take the spirit to where we think it needs to go, that are going to bring compassion even in the times where anger would seem to be the most appropriate response. So through our words, even if certain feelings are already starting to form within us, through our words we can change the direction of where our emotions are going. We can buy time, which is extremely valuable when dealing with anger. Every second that we buy, we're reducing the level of toxicity that's going to be expressed when we're angry. And if we wait long enough, then the storm might pass completely. We might laugh at ourselves. And so this is so important because what we seem to misunderstand or to not realize enough is how much we're programming every cell in our body, every process within our organism. Everything is being programmed. All the angels are being programmed by everything that we are observing at any given moment. And so any change in how we perceive reality and all of our processes are being affected. Our entire manifestation is being affected. And even though this might be too minor to notice, because there are so many events that gather together to create our reality, but over time we can notice, over time we can see how people who have different rituals as part of their diet, different experiences, they become completely different. Over time, they become so different they might not be able to understand each other any longer. And this huge change is just a combination of many angels over years and years that create these entirely different people. And so when we record within ourselves, when we create a policy by observing a reality, and we create a certain angel, a certain interpretation, a certain possibility, this is going to affect many different functions and many different maneuvers that we can't even think, we can't even understand. They're so subtle, they're so deeply embedded within our biology, within the processes that cause how we feel and how we think and how we express ourselves, that we cannot understand how they affect the results. But the results are certainly being affected. And there are an infinite amount of possibilities of how the spirit can manifest, of what the spirit can become. And so when we create certain potentials, when we show the spirit certain possibilities, then we are making emphasis in certain areas of the map, of the spiritual map, and those areas are where the spirit is going to frequent. Those areas are going to impact every aspect of that being. So when the spirit even just sees a revolt against reality, or even contemplates that reality is already being created and it becomes a possibility for the future. And that possibility does not serve the spirit, because the spirit is reality. The spirit is trying to build within reality. The spirit is trying to unite with reality. Reality is the only base available. There's nowhere else to land. So anytime we deny reality, anytime we revolt against reality, we resist reality, then something within the spirit is being broken. And that brokenness, over thousands of years, is the brokenness that we're experiencing. All that anger being passed through the generations in their behaviors, in their expressions, in their interactions, in the way they use their emotions, and the way their emotions use them. All this comes together and becomes the reality of the next generation. And so the anger has only been getting deeper. So even though people are not so angry, from a very young age, they already realized that they shouldn't expect too much from life. So the anger is very deeply embedded, unless they had the circumstances that didn't make them feel that way. Not many of us have that. And this is very young. Children, they don't realize that anything is wrong when this is taking place. In fact, to them, this is absolutely right. They're adjusting to reality, they think. But no, they're being removed from reality. Reality wasn't this bitter. It's just the adults. And so all that disappointment, it gets stored somewhere. Because a disappointment means the nature was violated. Either there was a setup, we were getting too excited about something that's not that exciting, or something is exciting and we're not getting access to it. And that's a disappointment of the nature. The nature is to discover, the nature is to experience. The nature is to get excited and then to receive. And so all this gets internalized within the being in order to adjust. How much life do we need? How much life do we want to create for this experience? How worth it is it going to be? And every disappointment, a little less spirit, a little less life. This is how our body can survive in all generations, in all communities, in all cultures. Not all of them are a fun way of surviving, yet the body will adjust and survive. Survival is before everything, because all potential is in survival. So giving away survival would be giving away all of it, any possibility of a future. So that's going to be the last to give away, and the quality is going to deteriorate pretty fast. And that's what's happened to humanity. Over thousands of years, we've lost the quality of life. we're much weaker than a human being used to be. We're much weaker in will, and we're much weaker physically. We're weaker in body and we're weaker in spirit. And this is because the anger has become more and more ingrained until the anger has become part of the culture, the disappointments, the brokenness. But humanity just started from one human being. It wasn't broken. Humanity broke it. And humanity is angry, but they don't understand the real reason for their anger. They're blaming people around them, they're blaming politicians, they're blaming whatever it is that is on their mind. But even if that problem were solved, we would still have a problem. So that's not really the source of the blame. That's just a symptom. That's just another side effect. When we're all angry, we need armies, we need police, we need laws, we need rules, we need all kinds of tactics to keep the peace. We need the people in charge because we're not in a condition to have it more easy. And so all these things are only symptoms. It's not the real reason to be angry. The real anger goes back thousands of years. We don't even remember anymore what we're angry about. We just know that we saw anger when we were growing up, and therefore there's anger in us. We've learned the patterns, and they're causing different types of damage inside of us. So this war, this is the only war. All the other wars are symptoms of this war. When this war will be won, not only will there not be war, there won't be weapons. Nobody will want to look at weapons, because what does looking at weapons do to you? What does it do to the spirit? It wakes up anger, damage, pain, frustration. So any symbol, anything that might remind the spirit of anything relating to anger, it doesn't want to touch. It doesn't want to see. It doesn't want to know about. It doesn't want to remember. It's not healthy. So if we win this war, we win all wars. But this war we cannot win with fighting. This war can only be won through surrender. And in order to surrender, we can't be too angry. If we're angry, we cannot surrender. And so this we have to work on from both sides. We work internally to reduce the resistance, and we work externally to improve the conditions, to improve the environment. So constantly balancing inside and outside. Improving the environment will reduce the anger, and changing the interpretation will reduce the anger. Having a kind heart, waking up compassion for humanity, for the conditions that we've been through, for the reality of how we got here, will reduce the anger. Beroiges rachem tisker. When there is anger, remember compassion. This is what we ask. Because if we don't remember compassion, in those moments, we're creating all the challenges that are going to come for us in the future. Because those angels are not working for us. They're not working for any humans. They come from the other side, from the imagined side. The side that's against us, that doesn't really exist, but in our imagination it does. And when that side gets to manifest speech and action, then it gets to pretend that it exists for a little longer. So may we all find the way to our hearts, the way to compassion, the way to reduce the anger, so we can surrender to what already is, so we can have what is, and whoever has what is will never be angry. Because what is worth more than anything that we can ever want. And so, may we gain access to what is and find redemption individually and collectively, together as one. May it happen soon. Any questions?
Thank you for the beautiful meditation.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure.
How do we deal with when there's like anger around us?
So, if you can help the situation, then of course, that's the best, is to bring everybody back to calm. But if we feel that we can't help the situation and being there is going to affect us negatively, then we shouldn't really be there. We should wait until things calm down and then revisit. Because it's very hard to make progress while the event is happening. The person is not really there. They don't really have access to their faculties. So it's not really within their power so much to overcome their urges. It takes time and it takes practice. So while the person is lost, there's no point in talking to them. After they come back to their senses, that's when we can see how to bring them back and make them realize a better way. Because anger doesn't solve anything. Anger simply says, this is not the way. And sometimes it's important to know that this is not the way, but there's no reason to ruin anything. And ultimately, anger is what ruins all the different cultures that weren't really suitable to human nature. Eventually, people will get frustrated and angry, and that's when the culture will start falling apart. So anger is sort of like a spiritual dissolution. It takes things apart. It eats things away. This is why it belongs to the angel of death. This is his area. This is his territory. And so when we want to solve things, when we want to build things, when we want to create something real, we have to keep anger away. If anger gets involved, then all good things will fall apart. So if we can have the most wonderful relationships, and then anger can just in 1 minute ruin what 20 years has built. And this is even more so when we think about bigger structures. If we want to build a community, if we want to build a country, if we want to build anything that should be based on a bond of love, because we want to go away from the model of fear, the thing that will destroy love the most is anger. Anger is something that sows hate. It makes people turn away from each other. It makes people not be able to stand each other. And so it's a very, very destructive energy. It's a very powerful energy. And this energy is called hell. The Rambam says in the letter, he says, "V'hoser kas milibecho v'have ro mipsarecho." It says, remove anger from your heart, and you'll remove evil from your flesh. And then he says, "Ve'en ro elo gehenem." Ro, evil, means hell. And so meaning, anger is at the root of hell. It's the fire that destructs the spiritual buildings that we can build. The most beautiful buildings that we can build, the fire of anger will come and destroy it. And so this is not a solution if we're trying to build something. Anger will not solve the problem. Anger says, not here. So we have to learn how to take that signal of not here and to cause something constructive to happen in order to make the change. So anger means something needs to change. Either the interpretation is off or the situation is off. Something is being violated. But acting it out, bringing out that anger and manifesting from that place is going to cause destruction. And that's not what we really want. In the moment of anger, we might think that that's what we want. But usually, for those people who lose themselves like that, later they come to regret it. Sometimes very soon. And so, it's a very, very powerful force. We don't understand the implications, because we see it and we assume that it's just part of our diet and it's okay. But spiritually, the way that it's spoken about, especially in the Zohar, this is the ultimate poison, that when we don't realize and we use it in the wrong places, this is what causes all the other things not to work in the right way. Because we don't have trust, we don't have proper relationships, we don't have the safety and security that we need, and that already reduces the function of the nervous system. And then we already don't have access to our intelligence, we're not fully ourselves, and it just goes from there. So it's a really, really important point, and we want to understand it very deeply so that it affects us from within. So because this is an unconscious response, we don't even have time to decide whether we want to get angry or not. It just comes over us. So we want to know this very deeply in a way that it's going to affect us even on the unconscious level.